Hello, philosophers! Here we are with our third framework, the ethics of care. If you have not already, please turn to page 22 of your reader and read Ethics of Care before listening to this screencast. Like the others, this screencast is going to introduce material that is not in the reader. For the previous ones, I did rehearse some of the sort of more main components of the frameworks, not all of it, but I went over a bit. I'd say for this screencast, I am not going over a lot of the terms that are noted in that highlighted box in your reader. Again, on page 22, I am going to sort of extend the ethics of care with some details that are not in there. All right, so again, please do make sure that you read this before moving on. All right, so if you have read it, let's turn to page 28, and this is where you should take your notes. All right, up to this point, we've done deontology or Kantianism, as well as utilitarianism or consequentialism. All right. The former, Kantianism, identified the right thing to do by using reason and by determining that since people are reasoning beings, they deserve respect, and because people deserve respect, we need to act with goodwill intent. Okay. Utilitarianism, conversely, was not as interested in the intent that drives an action as much as the consequence that follows the action. All right? It is outcome oriented. We're going to look at another model, and as you'll see, it does have an element of outcome importance, or I guess consequentialist bend to it, but it is different than these two. And what ethics of care suggests is that these other models treat ethics as if it's sort of done in a laboratory, right? These highly hypothetical scenarios, like super sterilized. It just doesn't have any bearing on the real world. And if we're going to really attempt to apply moral reasoning in a real world, we have to consider some other elements. And these include relationships and emotions. They're both valid, all right? Love toward a friend, empathy toward a stranger, disdain toward a backstabber. The ethics of care allows for these emotions to inform action, all right? Relationships is the key. It's not just, I guess, math problems with humans in it, right? But these are real people. The trolley scenario will look different, right? If you are the one driving the trolley and you're the one that has to, bust into people, or if the person on the tracks is a loved one, the person you love most in the world, right? And that's the person on the one side as opposed to the 5 people on the other side who might be strangers. It looks very different when you consider relationships. And so what ethics of care offers is this notion that all people are not equal, right? This impartiality of utilitarianism, which is a core component, is erroneous for ethics of care. You must consider relationships. All people are not the same. All right, let's keep moving. Okay, so I guess what I'd like to focus on in this presentation is some research by Joan Tronto and Bernice Fisher, who say, it's not enough just to say one needs to care, but there are 5 virtues that people must know if they are to provide care. Okay, so I guess for the remainder of this presentation, I'm just going to kind of go over these 5 virtues, all right? And the first is attentiveness. You can't really help anyone if you are not aware that there are people in need, all right? So the attentiveness really is a prerequisite for providing care. And Tronto and Fisher would suggest that this attentiveness is something that one may train for, all right? It's not something that's just all of a sudden going to happen. But individuals should seek greater awareness of the people around them, all right? And I guess what they would suggest is think of someone who you think in your mind provides really, really, really great care, all right? And no doubt that person is an individual who is attentive and aware of the needs that people need. So attentiveness is the first component. It's and they juxtapose it against this idea of willful ignorance, even just ignorance, willful or otherwise, really. All right. The second is responsibility. And what they would suggest is that we need to cultivate an attitude of responsibility toward those that need care. And maybe on this point, we say not just those as in like individuals, but this model may also be applied to societies and even the environment, okay? So what they would suggest is we need to change our mindset toward a responsibility to act in a certain way, as opposed to some other frameworks that talk about duty and obligation, all right? So this idea of responsibility, which suggests greater ownership, right? Obligation sounds like you signed a contract that you might even want to get out of, but responsibility suggests that idea of ownership. All right. Competence. It's not enough to be aware that someone needs care or something needs care and to feel that sense of responsibility, but you actually have to have some training or understanding on how to deliver that care. So in this case, as I mentioned earlier, it is sort of a consequentialist philosophy. The outcomes, the results, the consequences are important. You should be able to, again, not just be aware that it's in need and feel responsible toward it, but you must also be competent to deliver that care. All right. I guess as an example, if an individual might have some more severe mental health problems or depression, I think being able to talk with those people is great, and at the same time, you don't have that level of competence that a professional therapist would have, right? Okay, so competence is key. Responsiveness. Within this one caring and one being cared for relationship, which is highlighted in the reading, there is this power dynamic that's happening, right? Which is, there's a gap there. And the one doing the caring is certainly in the power position, the one cared for, one in less power. It is important that the one caring gets continual feedback, or is responsive to the feedback that the one being cared for is offering. All right. So, they're over the course of being cared, some things might change, people might be okay, but the idea isn't to approach someone who needs care and to come with the idea that I know what you need and I'm going to deliver it for you, right? But someone who's giving really great care is someone who listens. Again, you might think about, who is that person that you think provides great care? I bet they're great listeners, all right? And finally, plurality. We talked about this idea that care can and should be applied to entities greater than another individual, bigger than families or states or countries, right? The world, all right? So plurality is essential in providing care. We all have blind spots, and, we might be attentive, responsible, competent in some ways. We might try and be responsive, but the hope is also, or I guess the reality is, as we provide care, we still have blind spots, especially when we attempt to provide care for places that are quite foreign. I think a lot about, again, solving global problems. We're not going to be those people from Seattle going to a lesser developed country and, again, figuring out how to solve these problems on our own. All right. It is important to, again, get proper feedback and provide the best level of care. And this happens through plurality. All right. So there is some similarities with the responsiveness piece, but Tronto and Fisher wanted to underscore this notion that care is offered not just to individuals, but larger entities as well. And in this larger global era, the concept of plurality, where everyone has blind spots, this concept of plurality is essential for providing great care. All right, so there they are. These are our 5 virtues for providing care. And that will do it for this one. I thank you.